because that's a Fugazi. All right?
That's a Fugazi? How do you know it's a Fugazi? You looked at it for 2 seconds.
Well, it's a fake.
Yeah, I know what a Fugazi is.
It's all a Fugazi. You know what a Fugazi is?
Fugazi, it's a fake.
Yeah, Fugazi, it's a wazi, it's a woozy, it's a fairy dust.
Coin Fugazi.
Coin Fugazi.
Coin Fugazi. Coin Fugazi. Coin Fugazi. Coin Fugazi.
Out of the Ether, the amazing story of Ethereum and the $55 million heist that almost destroyed it all is by Matthew Leising. It's published by Wiley, now available everywhere books are sold. And Leising covers market structure out at Bloomberg and has for the last few years kind of been a go-to analyst of blockchain and cryptocurrencies for the outlet. His where I got turned on to him, if I remember my skeletal trace memory here, is what I now consider to be kind of a seminal article on the Ethereum DAO, or Decentralized Autonomous Organization hack, that was titled the Ether Thief, which we'll link to in the show notes. And it documented the drama almost a year later in 2017 after it happened, as the summer of 2016 dust was kind of beginning to settle. And it's a combination. I think if you read The Ether Thief, that will then prompt you just to go buy the book, because it's old school journalism meets new school journalism. It's dogged, gumshoe reporting. It's got a flair for literary suspense, and again, it leaves you wanting more, a lot more. So Leising is here to talk about what is now a full-fledged book, again, titled Out of the Ether, The Amazing Story of Ethereum and the $55 million Heist That Almost Destroyed It All. Cinematic, historical, a really definitive look at the culture of Ethereum. And if all that wasn't enough, it actually makes news. He names one of the alleged hackers. So without any further ado, Matthew Leising, thanks so much, man, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Wow, Edward. Yeah, thank you for that intro. That was humbling and really great. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. I think, as I told you pre-show here, I think I was settling in to read more of a, I guess, kind of a technical take, or maybe an uber pointy-headed financial take, and it has those elements for sure. It really is it's like reading fiction, nonfiction, I guess is the best way I can describe it. But before I slobber over you rather too much more, how does a market structure analyst at Bloomy find cryptocurrency? I seem to remember when I was covering, at least in 2017, out at Bitcoin.com, that Bloomberg was, in our circles, at our news desk, was kind of considered to be skeptical, at the very least, of crypto. So how does the market structure analyst wander into cryptocurrency?
Yeah, so as a reporter, I was covering market structure, which means, how markets work or don't work. Are they being, improved upon, or how are they evolving? A big beat, or a big part of my beat to kind of define what I did there was going through, after the financial crisis in 2008, the over-the-counter derivative swaps market, was completely unregulated, and then it went through and became regulated through the Dodd-Frank Act. So that's kind of like a test case to sort of explain what I do. And I followed that very closely. So as I, then kept working at that beat, I had heard about Bitcoin, around 2014 or 13, somewhere. And I just missed it. I didn't think it, I just couldn't understand it, how ones and zeros would, ever have value. And I didn't get it. But then once I kind of got the blockchain component of it, about this distributed ledger, where you could either, have a public chain or a private chain, that really kind of was the light bulb moment for me. And I realized that this could change how all the things I wrote about worked. And so in 2015, I went to my editor and said, hey, I want to start covering this blockchain stuff. And he's like, wow, okay, what the heck is blockchain? So it was a bit early. There were other people covering it, but you're right. Like, Bloomberg was skeptical of it for a long time, especially I think the Bitcoin part of the equation, because it has a reputation. And, if you're a sort of mainstream publication, you don't want to get associated with Silk Road and with, money laundering and all the negatives of Bitcoin, that some people only saw the negatives. So, that's kind of how I got into it. And then, I really started with how the financial world might use blockchain to change like the back office operations of certain things and hopefully make things more efficient and cost less money. And then I really got into Ethereum in early 2016 when I met Joe Lubin for the first time, who started Consensus, and he kind of made the second light bulb go over my head about Ethereum and how it was so much more than, Bitcoin is great at moving value and Ethereum is great at kind of doing everything else. Is the way I kind of think about it. So that's in a nutshell, how I got into this.
Yeah, that actually leads to my next question, which you kind of already answered. I think I told you that I cover the currency side of cryptocurrency and sort of the peer-to-peer electronic cash aspect of it, which I guess has become, less so now, but it's kind of a battle line or a distinction, I guess, in coverage. And I think for a lot of the people who would listen to this podcast at first blush, they would be more inclined towards the Bitcoin side of things. And I think you framed it well there in the end of your remarks. So what is kind of a back of the envelope definition? Like, what is Ethereum and why was the DAO concept like so integral to it? If you can do that quickly.
Yeah, so Ethereum, Vitalik Buterin, who invented Ethereum, was a big Bitcoin proponent. He co-founded Bitcoin Magazine. He wrote about Bitcoin and all the various technical and social aspects of it really well. And he was a kid in high school, basically, when he was doing that.
I was going to say, he was a teenager. He's like 19 years old when he invented Ethereum.
Yeah. And when he was writing about Bitcoin, he was like, he'd have Greek classes and stuff during the day in high school, and then go and write articles for Bitcoin Magazine, in his free time when he was like 17 and 18. So he kind of he understood Bitcoin very well, backwards and forwards. But like some people, he got kind of frustrated that, he saw this potential of this global distributed network of computers that could reach consensus and be a ledger and be uncontrollable in terms of like governments can't stop it, corporations can't censor it, all the things that a lot of people just like love about this technology. But then he became frustrated that like it seemed, the Bitcoin code was written to do that thing, and it does it very well. And so people were trying to, do colored coins. They were trying to do layer 2 kind of stuff. But, the Bitcoin underlying code just doesn't really support it very well. And so after traveling the world and meeting a lot of people who were pushing the envelope with Bitcoin, Vitalik realized, he wanted to create a platform for people to do whatever they wanted on top of a blockchain. So the smart contract idea was something that fit into that, where basically now you can write computer code and host it in a smart contract on a blockchain where it could be verified and stored on this distributed Ethereum blockchain. So it gave rise to all sorts of new possibilities. One of which, of course, is Ether, which you need. It's the currency. You can't participate on the Ethereum blockchain without using Ether to fuel your transactions. So there's a money aspect to it in that sense. And then there's a sense of like, if you can make like anything that's in a contract kind of form can now be written in code and put in a smart contract, and now it's available for anybody to use who can access the Ethereum blockchain. So one of the biggest things, the early things that came about was the DAO, decentralized autonomous organization. Like you said, this was basically a virtual venture capital fund where everybody in the Ethereum world pooled all their money together, all their Ether, into the DAO, And the idea was you would get tokens in return for the ether that you deposited. And then people would come up with development projects of applications that they wanted to run on top of Ethereum. But of course, you need money, right, to be a dev and to do your project. So the holders of the DAO tokens would vote on the projects that they liked. And then if those, if they ended up winning the vote, then they get development funds. So it's a great idea. Very much in line with how Ethereum likes to kind of take aim at centralized processes, and decentralize them and make them available to anyone. It ended up getting $150 million by the time the fundraising round closed. And then with the rise in the price of Ether, it was at $250 million, or $250 million in June of 2016 when it was hacked. And so, as I write in the book, this is like the biggest thing in Ethereum. It wasn't even a year old, and everybody was watching it. And then in front of everybody's eyes on Friday, June 17th, 2016, money just starts getting drained out of the DAO. And by the end of the day, it was $55 million had just been hacked. And so everybody kind of freaked out, and that's where the book kind of takes off.
Yeah, and, this is going to sound blasphemous to some listeners, but I often think that the irony of that early Ethereum, paradox, irony paradox. I get lost in my own profundity sometimes here. I think the irony of it is that the god of decentralization sort of outweighs everything else in the Ethereum universe, and there's much to laud for that. But then, in a weird way, when you create a DAO, you sort of create this weird decentralized, centralized honeypot. I'm sure I'm not the first to say that, but does that make any sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I write, I make this point in the book that what you're really talking about here is with a smart contract, once it's deployed on the Ethereum blockchain, it's very hard to change it. You can change it, but it takes, a consensus vote of all the stakeholders, and it takes weeks. And, you really have to have a sort of political campaign behind it, because you have to basically convince everybody to update their software so that the contract can now be changed. So it's very difficult, and that leads you to the realization that it kind of, I don't want to say it requires, but the code that goes into a smart contract needs to be really good. And I think your audience will know that code is very rarely good. Right. Stuff happens, it breaks. There's unforeseen consequences, and so it's an interesting kind of duality where you have this promise of opening up the world to a lot of users who all they need is internet access, but at the same time, you're relying on developers and code writers who need to get the code right from the start, which is hard.
For sure. And if I sound like I have sour grapes here, not at all. I'm in awe of everything that Ethereum has done and continues to do. But going back to your first crack at, looking at the DAO and its implications, and I think Bloomberg as an entity itself, giving it coverage raises, I think it's easy now to look back and go, that was a significant part of Ethereum and cryptocurrency history. But at the time, I think just Bloomberg covering it and giving it the attention it did raised the profile of everybody in the space. And so the article I'm speaking of is called The Ether Thief, which I will link to in the show notes. And is it fantastic. It's not only good because of your writing, which I don't want to downplay, but also in the sense of how they presented it, which, if memory serves, there were a lot of pop-out references, and they really embraced the idea. But or of you covering, I guess, because it was kind of a sexy, here are these crypto hotshots getting burned. But more importantly, what did in my mind, what did the Ethereans think of the Ether Thief and how you approached the DAO hack initially?
I think they liked it, and that was you always worry as a writer. These people give you their time and they trust you with conversations and details, and they hope you get it right. I think I got it right in that story, and I think that helped when it came time to write the book, because there were certain people when I wrote the magazine story in 2017, I knew who they were, but they weren't comfortable speaking to me. It was, maybe it was a little too soon to the DAO, or they didn't trust me because, that's fine. But then I think because they didn't know me really. And then once the magazine story came out and I saw what I did, I think, I got access to a lot more people when it came time to write the book, which is great and really super important for something like this, because I don't want to leave your listeners with the impression that this is only about the DAO.
Right.
What I wanted to do is string the DAO story throughout the whole book as a narrative device, as tension about, here's this theft, and I'm going to try to find some of the hackers, and, here's some great new information that you've never heard before. But then in all the other chapters, I'm going to sprinkle around there, like, here's Vitalik Buterin and his life story, and here's how he came to create Ethereum and the white paper, and here are the crazy group of people he gathered around him as the co-founders, and how there was political infighting and backstabbing and greed and all sorts of like great human drama. And when I was reporting the book, I just could not believe how it just kept getting like crazier and crazier. So I knew I wanted to do that to fill out the story. And so it's really, I think you walk away from the book having a pretty good idea of what it is and how it came to be and what it means, as well as hopefully, having it be a good read and something that you want to keep turning the page.
For sure. And I was going to ask you if that was intentional, but you just answered it, using the DAO sort of as a device to kind of string along the reader. And
yeah, I knew that I didn't have enough for a book just with a DAO hack, because it's very hard. Relying on blockchain forensics and doing stuff like that is technical. It's hard. Doesn't come easily to me as a writer. I've never written code in my life, so I needed a lot of help. But luckily, I got it. But I knew that was a definite piece of this puzzle, but it wasn't the entire puzzle. And there was a much bigger and more amazing story to tell, even with the DAO.
I was going to wait to ask you, but in a way, part of my interviewing style is to just completely get ahead of the listener here. But you seem to have a love or developed I don't know if it's simpatico, but for the people in the space, like I'm not sure how to explain it, but, and I don't mean to crap on the guy, but sometimes like someone at the New York Times or some others who cover the space, they sort of cover it with a sneer, like, here are these lunatics and here I am, bestowing coverage upon them. I don't get that sense from your writing. And I get the sense that even if you don't entirely agree with what's going on or whatever, I think you're I guess sympathetic is the word I'm going to go with, but you seem to have an affinity for some of the Ethereum people, which I also find myself having a great affinity for them as well. Is that fair to say? Do you think you developed kind of like, hey, these guys are onto something kind of interesting?
Yeah, I mean, yes. First of all, as a writer, I want to present people as human beings, as three-dimensional, people with flaws and, with great attributes and with compassion, because it means a lot to me that these folks take a lot of time out of their lives to talk to me about stuff. And, in some cases, I interviewed some folks in the book, 10 to 12 times. It was a lot of work, and they were very generous. So there's that. I want to repay them for that generosity by presenting them as characters and not as two-dimensional cutouts. Yeah, and there's the fact that these guys are and women are just amazingly interesting people. Like Griff Green is just like, you could write a whole book about Griff Green. Vitalik is really very, very multidimensional in ways that I don't think a lot of people see from his sort of public persona. But when you go, like I did, and you talk to his high school teachers and you talk to his mom and his dad and his stepmom, and you get this sense of him, and like they shared some things with me, like this document he wrote as a 7-year-old called The Encyclopedia of Bunnies. It was like a 20-page document all about bunnies, and like he was fascinated with them. And it's just like this hilarious document where he's got all these funny jokes about bunnies and like how many man and girl bunnies are there. And it's just like, the 7-year-old in him just like leaps out of the page when you read this thing. And then there's, just like the other people who are kind of intellectually really just charging forward with this idea that Ethereum presents, like with Gavin Wood and some other people, about like they really want to make the world a better place by using decentralized systems to get away from centralized authorities. And it's just you kind of have to repay that passion in a sense, like, because what they put out there is, it's easy to ridicule it. And I'm not like swallowing anything hook, line, or sinker, but
sure,
I want to just do my best to present a reader with these people in all of their three-dimensionality and their flaws and their traits and everything that makes human beings so interesting.
Yeah, we're early in the Vitalik Buterin evolution, which I'm about to ask you about, but I wanted to remark that the way you end the book with the Burning Man anecdote and stuff with Griff, I thought was really interesting. Going back here just a tad, so we're talking about Out of Ether, the amazing story of Ethereum and the $55 million heist that almost destroyed it all, by Matthew Leising. That's out now and available bookstores and online. Hitting, I guess, Vitalik again because he's so well known, at least as a figurehead. I thought you accomplished that. You rounded him out a lot for me. I confess to having kind of a voyeuristic preoccupation with the guy. I never really delved deep into his personal story, or maybe I should say it's never been elucidated beyond the fact that, he has the run-in with Musk or Peter Thiel rather, and it's all the points everybody knows already. But I think what you really show is his evolution as you'll see it a lot, especially on Twitter with Vitalik, is that he's grappling with being essentially a central point of failure in a system that he's desperately trying to decentralize. And at the same time, he's trying to eschew the cult of personality that's arising around him and trying to maintain sort of a cypherpunk ethos. And there's all these sort of, people and money and stuff pulling for his attention. And so far, at least, from what I've read and especially in your portrait of him in this book, is that he doesn't seem to be corrupted by it, right? Like, again, this is kind of what I was sort of hinting at in the earlier question about your affinity or affection for these people. Vitalik, this is way overstepping journalistic bounds, but he seems like a really good guy.
Yeah. I mean, for someone who, at certain points was probably worth more than $1 billion based on the ether that he holds, he's incredibly humble. He has no pretenses to like Lambos or, like some of the other co-founders have been much more flamboyant in how they've chosen to, live their life. There are stories like his dad, like just begged him to get a new pair of shoes in high school because his were falling apart, but he didn't want to. His mom, said she'd take him to the store and like, he'd see toys and stuff, but he just wasn't interested in it. Even as a small kid, it's just, he doesn't have, I think there's something about the commercialization or that doesn't, it's never really affected him. So I think that has helped him be grounded in a way it would be hard for a lot of people. And he has an immense amount of power that, like you were alluding to. Like, do you remember there was that day on Twitter where the rumor was that he was dead and ether was like dropping a stone, and he shows up with like a picture, or he's got a hash or something that proves that it's like the block height or something, that he would do. He would never do a newspaper, right? So,
right.
So yeah, and I think I admire that in a person because we see so much, and it's far too often people with power and money just abuse those stations, and it's troubling. And here's somebody, and even at a young age, I mean, imagine being that rich when you're 20, and having a head on his shoulders like that. That impresses me, and it continues to impress me. And I think every day that goes by, Ethereum relies less on Vitalik. And I think, I honestly don't. People say that it's centralized through him, and I get that to a sense. But in the case of the DAO, when people were making the pitch, we need to fork, and we need you to update your software to fork. I mean, he certainly was a proponent there, but they got pretty much everyone in the world. It was like 99.9% of the people running Ethereum upgraded to the fork. And there's an interesting story about the one mining pool that didn't, and that's in the book as well. And that was probably intentional. So, look, if you tell me that he runs like the show, great, but to the 99.9% like aspect, I don't think so. I think people have their own sense about what Ethereum is, and a lot of different people have contributed in a lot of meaningful ways beyond Vitalik. And so
Sure.
I think he's a figurehead in a sense more than like a leader, if that distinction makes sense.
Well, I totally do. And I think people who are honest, even if they're not Ethereum fans necessarily for whatever reason, I think the most you could say about Vitalik is that he's kind of a Schelling point. He's sort of what people sort of rally around and have as a common goalpost or whatever, but he's not. I don't think he's any more in charge of it than again, just a simple, even a cursory examination of that project, if it's even possible at this point, will disabuse anybody of the notion that he's moving projects and so on. I think he's that's just something we do in our minds, and again, what I appreciate about your book is that you round him out. I'm going to say flatten him out a bit, but which is contradictory. But I think you know what I'm saying. But getting back to
the beginning too, like he knew from the beginning. He told me that he was really happy when people like developers started reaching out to him who could write in C++ or in Go or whatever. Like there's Jeff Wilkie and Gavin Wood, and because he wanted, he needed help from the very get-go, and he wanted the different clients to be written in different languages, and that's what ended up happening. And so, like he is obviously the creator or the inventor of it. He didn't create it. Like there was a whole group that created it.
Right.
But yeah, so from the, he's a figurehead as I think of him.
For sure. And I don't know, there's just something, I could be totally wrong. He's young and he's got a long way to go. But seeing that dude coked out with Eastern European hookers somewhere in Bulgaria doesn't seem to be on the plate of things, where he exits scams and, the Interpol is hunting for him. I don't know. And again, I get this vibe not only from having read him and listened to him for years, but mostly through your book, that he just comes across very, very well. And I'm glad someone finally took the time to kind of delve into him, and I'm glad he gave, which says a lot about him too, that he would give you that time.
He was really generous. It was great.
Yeah, and I'd be remiss if I didn't at least hit a little bit on the DAO before I let you go here. The DAO hack itself. This takes you everywhere. Like I say, you're Burning Man. You go to Sweden, Tokyo. You're all over the place. Looking at that DAO hack, can you go through? I have just a bunch of.
You tell me, what did you think after you read that part? What's your opinion of what I laid out?
Which part?
About the guy I named, Tomoaki Sato.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I love the fact that you take us first to Sweden and that you fail. Or I fail is
Switzerland, but yeah.
Switzerland. Sorry.
Yeah.
I always do that. I always do Sweden and Switzerland, and I have it's just an ugly American side of me. I don't know why, but yeah, Zurich. Sorry. And you take us there, and that becomes essentially fruitless. But here's what I like about your approach to things. So I think as a journalist, and I'm less of a prominent journalist than you are, but I think I depend way too much on emails, Telegram, Signal. There's something about going face to face with these fellows, doing the in-person stuff, taking the flight. I've been at conferences where they're literally in the champagne room, 3 doors down, and we're texting.
Yeah.
So there's a laziness to the kind of journalism that I do that I find yours being so refreshing. So when you go to Tokyo and when you challenge him on, it's very sly. So I'm purposely trying not to give too much away here, but essentially what you do is you sort of draw out of him inferences. So I don't think you ever get him really to say, yeah, this is me, I'm the guy, I did it, this is how it, but you use inferences through Poloniex, exchange. I was really excited to see that Voorhees' side shift plays a role, because this is from our perspective, from my listener's perspective, he capitulates, right? He gives in to the man and changes to KYC and all that stuff. And from the more responsible, adults in the room, he's doing KYC and what you're supposed to be doing. But essentially,
nothing, man. You just had to have an email address.
right. He doesn't go too crazy, but for us, there's a huge difference there. But I love that you make those connections, and yeah, I'm not sold on it. Like I say, you make news with his name, but the fact that, as far as I know, he's not come out and defended himself, right? Like he hasn't said, no, I haven't, or no, I didn't, rather, right?
As far as I know, you're right. He hasn't said anything since the book has been out.
Is there a danger there in me kind of concluding, well, therefore he did it, or just that he,
No. I mean, look, this was a quandary I found myself in. Like you said, I thought originally that there was some people in Switzerland who had pulled off one of the hacks. And then it turned out to be a dead end, and I was wrong. And the information that I was relying on was kind of like 2016, 2017 era information. And then when I started looking into it more carefully in 2019, forensics had gotten a lot better. Shapeshift was integrated to other systems. So now you could, there was this big piece of the puzzle that had been missing previously. And so it was a much fuller way of looking at the transaction history. And so that pointed me towards Tokyo and this guy, Tomoaki Sato, who had a source at an exchange who said the Poloniex, 2 withdrawals of Bitcoin ended up in this Ethereum contract in this wallet that I then linked to the attack contract. Mm-hmm. So it was only a few hops and steps on the blockchain. Once I had the sort of end points, then I could connect the dots in the middle. And so I went to Tokyo to talk to this guy, and, barring the full-on confession, which, I didn't expect to get, I had to just kind of go with what he gave me. And so it was a difficult interview, and I wanted to leave it up to the reader as to what they thought at the end of it, because I don't have any way of knowing for sure. I think he's involved, is what is my take. And his account, as he told me on the record for the book, was it was open to other people. So that's his story, is that other people had access to his Poloniex account, and because he was brokering trades for them, he was buying Bitcoin or Ether and other crypto for these people who couldn't buy it themselves. I think it's probably, and I don't really know this, I'm speculating, is because geographical reasons, not technical. It's like they might have been in areas of Asia where that it was harder to buy crypto for yourself.
I think a lot of us forget how, because it sounds crazy someone would do that, but back in the day, this was par for the course for people who wanted to get in.
Yeah. So I interviewed him, I asked him, and I went over all the stuff I had with him many times. And, at the end of the day, he said, yeah, it's possible that the other people used my account and withdrew that Bitcoin and then went on to do the hack. And I want your readers to know one thing that's important. there were several hacks on the DAO, not just one. So the big one on Friday is the one where the $55 million was stolen. That hack was really elegant, and they covered their tracks very, very well. It's basically, from my point of view as a reporter, basically impossible to track that because they used mixers, they did all sorts of stuff, and they were very careful. So that happened on Friday, and then this guy that I think is involved was on the next Tuesday. There was a second hack, and I think it's a copycat attack because once the you can, if you know what you're doing on Ethereum, once the Friday hack occurs, you can go and find the attack contract and just kind of cut and paste it and use it if you got the balls to do it and try another hack. And I think that's what happened, and I think that's the guy that I feel is involved is on the second hack on Tuesday, which was the second biggest, and it got forgetting how many ether it stole. It was around 300,000, I think, if memory serves. So, but not as big as the 55 million. But I just want to kind of make sure that people don't think that it's always like it's complicated, I guess.
Yeah, and that's always my thinking whenever I'm asked about Ethereum and in the age of DeFi and so on now, and supposed hacks. I always go back to the DAO hack, and I'm, this is going to be controversial in of itself, but it's hard. And in one of the rare instances in my life, the FBI and I agree. I'm not sure where there's a crime a lot of the times with Ethereum related hacks, and the word hack doesn't seem to quite get at what they're doing sometimes, because I'll ask about the mechanism. Okay, so how did this and this and that? And someone will explain. I'll say, okay, so you could do this, and it doesn't. People will use the analogy. Oh, well, it's like having a code on a vault safe, and you have the code there and the vault door, so that it stops people from getting a sort of an implied. You can't go, and someone starts monkeying with the code on the vault door, and therefore it gets in and so on. And that's the sort of the moral, ethical trespasses there. But I think it's a lot harder sometimes, as you say, when you get to, even though as far as the reporting I saw, you were one of the few who actually kind of zeroed in on that Tuesday hack. And even you come away with, look, it's complicated. And so I think, I'm not sure what kind of question I have here, but I do think, that's what I wanted to ask. So on that complicated issue, with Silk Road, there seemed to be a clear villain in the U.S. Department of Justice, sort of milieu at 2R, to the crankier libertarian guys, the anarcho-capitalist guys. Bitcoin was just, it was such a threat to the American. They had to go after poor Ross Ulbricht. Again, this is how we look at it. And they get their man, and the rest is kind of history. But with the DAO hack a couple of years later, and this is a wonderful part, I think, of your story, the FBI kind of just goes, meh, like it's complicated.
Yeah. I tried to get the FBI wouldn't talk to me after a year of trying, because I think they just kind of want to leave it in the past. But that's what I was told. Back for the magazine story was that they believed that the Justice Department believed that there was a crime and that Americans were harmed, but that the jurisdiction was a real issue. Because, where does a smart contract live?
Try explaining that to a jury.
Yeah. And then the money they basically got their money back. And a lot of people actually made money on that, because now all of a sudden they had Ether Classic and,
right.
in their wallet as well, which is just this story is just so wild, and it just gets wilder and wilder the more into it you go. So, yeah, it's so this guy stole the money. And then the community fought back and did a hard fork and got their money back. And then somebody kept mining on the old chain, and Ether Classic was born. And now, they had millions of Ether Classic all around the world. And so
that's an entirely other branch of this idea. So
it is, and it's like it's not even science fiction. I mean, it's nuts. It's like it's a great, fascinating part of this big story, but it is I think something that deserves its own another book on it for itself.
For sure. And I'm talking with Matthew Leising. He's author of the book Out of the Ether, The Amazing Story of Ethereum and the $55 million Heist That Almost Destroyed It All. It's published by Wiley, available now. I'm going to let you go. I've already lied to you and taken up way too much of your time. Two things, which you can either choose to answer both or one if you're more inclined, if you want to get out of here. What is line 666, which I think is a funny way to jump off and to get people into the article and in the book. And then lastly, here's an easy one. What's the future of Ethereum and Bitcoin as you see it?
So again, like back to the fact is stranger than fiction. The bug in the DAO code came on line 666, which is like, if you made that up, you just get laughed out of the room.
It's kind of like Kushner having his office at 666 Fifth Avenue.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, it was as simple as a couple lines of code got switched. Like if they had the line 667 before 666 or something to that effect, the bug that was exploited wouldn't have been exploitable. So that's one thing that I loved. As a writer, you just love those sorts of details when they're true. And that was one of the things that I got really excited about when I was writing the magazine story.
And I loved how you brought in Emin Gunser of Cornell in that. That was fantastic.
Yeah. He's really helpful along all this whole journey from the magazine to the book to now. So the future, I don't think Bitcoin's going anywhere. I think a permissionless payment system that is global and unstoppable and uncensorable is valuable, and that's why Bitcoin has a value. I think so. As a payment option, I see Bitcoin being around for a very long time. I think Ethereum is fascinating to watch in a lot of different ways, and in one, like the best known ways, I think to briefly. The ICO craze of 2017 was nuts, and there was a lot of fraud, but it basically created a brand new way of people raising money to develop projects, which is a fundamental part of the traditional financial system. You need money to start a company, and you need to raise it somehow. And here, an ICO decentralized that and allowed anybody in the world to buy your coin or donate to you with Ether, and now you have money to start developing your app. So a whole new way of raising capital. Now, a couple years later, we're seeing in DeFi, people are now pledging their Ether or other crypto or DAI as collateral for loans that they earn interest on, and then people use that collateral to do other things. And so now there's a decentralized lending aspect to crypto that is, you think about lending in the traditional financial world, it is another huge component of it. You could argue that it's maybe the most important aspect of a bank is to loan money to people. And now they're figuring out ways of doing that, like peer-to-peer and without anybody in the middle, like Bank of America or the Fed or anybody else being involved. So every few years now, it seems like the pattern is like this other huge chunk of the financial world gets kind of figured out, quote unquote, by crypto people and in this peer-to-peer decentralized fashion. So I'm just excited to see what the next one is, and that, people are, already doing decentralized exchanges and things like that. And it moves so fast and things get fucked up and people, get hacked and people don't do audits and get, lose money and it's nuts. But at the end of the day, like really serious things are being created here that I find fascinating, and we all get to watch it in real time, which is another sort of amazing aspect to this industry. So I'm very bullish on it. I think it's only going to get better.
Agreed. And I love the evolutionary aspect of it. Well, I can't thank you enough for all the time here. And again, this is the great Matthew Leising. He's author of the book Out of the Ether, The Amazing Story of Ethereum and the $55 million Heist That Almost Destroyed It All, out from Wiley. Available now. It's a fantastic read. It is really something that you will not be able to put down. It's just the right sort of Goldilocks combination of all the elements we've discussed here, from the literary side to the mystery side to making news and technical stuff. And you really get to know the Ethereum community, which I found fascinating. And of course, Dmitry Buterin is a hoot every time you read him. So before I let you go, then, how can people follow you, follow your work, and keep up with all things Matthew Leising?
Yeah, I'm out there. I'm on Twitter, just at Matt Leising. I'm on Keybase. I'm on Signal. I'm all over the place. It's pretty easy to find me. I don't hide. And you can Google me for my Bloomberg email. It's all out there too. It's just mleising@bloomberg.net. And I'd love to hear from people. Some of the best stories I've ever gotten are just kind of people getting in touch who out of the blue. So hit me up.
Sure, man. Thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. And best of luck to you.
Thank you, Edward. I really appreciate this. Thanks a lot.